Kia ora tātou, Daja hao, Nieman hao. I understand everyone's going to be getting a bit tired, so look, we're going to talk in this session mainly about multi, about Baiju. That was what you all wanted to hear, wasn't it? No, actually, we're going to talk about infrastructure, but we're going to talk about infrastructure with a multi flavour. So bear with us. Look, it's my pleasure to welcome our panellists today, two people that will be no strangers to the audience. Frank Xu. Frank has been involved with the New Zealand infrastructure scene, and particularly in construction, and through his association, which represents Chinese builders and infrastructure players, and I'll get Frank to talk a little bit about that during his remarks. And over the last few years, we have seen more and more involvement in the New Zealand infrastructure scene from China, often sight unseen actually, because we see something like a tunnel boring machine which was used for the CRL, which had a German badge on it, but was actually manufactured in China. So some of that infrastructure involvement that we've seen has perhaps gone sight unseen to a lot of people. And then our other panelist is Li Xingyao. Li Xingyao is with China Construction Bank, and New Zealand is blessed, I think, to have three of China's major banks here, which brings not just the capability to finance things, but also the experience and the knowledge of how to structure complicated projects. We've heard a lot today about operating at China speed. And for those of us that have been going to China for a long time, China speed is indeed something to behold. Whenever I'm talking about China to different audiences, I like to use the old phrase, seeing is believing. Because I think if you don't visit China a lot, and if you don't follow what's going on in China, it's only seeing that helps you believe just what is possible. And as we move from traditional to next generation infrastructure, the focus on innovation and on expertise that we can learn from China is going to be very important for New Zealand. We know that New Zealand has a long-standing infrastructure deficit, and we know that that deficit has been exacerbated, particularly this calendar year, from some of the weather events that we associate with climate change, and which are starting to have a significant impact, not just on the infrastructure, but on productivity, and forcing us to make some significant changes to our thinking. And so China's expertise in that regard will be very important. So the way China has developed its infrastructure, the way it's been constructed and maintained, as well as the final end product, are all areas that we can learn from in what we're doing. If we care about infrastructure, and if we care about New Zealand having the sort of infrastructure that can really support economic growth, then we need to change our thinking. This is about opportunity. It's about understanding what is possible in China. So today we're going to look at a case study province, and as I mentioned, it is the home of multi, but also the home of one of our panellists. So we might start by you just telling us a little bit about your home province, and then we'll see then we're going to see the first of 3 videos that we're going to use to highlight the case study of Guizhou province.
Okay, thank you, Brett. I'm a banker, but I'm not going to speak from a banker's perspective today. I just want to share some stories about my hometown, Guizhou province, which is a relatively undeveloped region located in the southwest part of China. It lies beside Sichuan and Yunnan province. I guess most of people in this room haven't heard Guizhou before, but you should know, as Brett just mentioned, Guizhou is the home of the famous Chinese liquor, Maotai, and also Lao Ganma, a chili sauce. And also you should know Guizhou nowadays is one of China's fastest growing economies. I'm going to tell you how building infrastructure has vastly changed my hometown, accelerates its economic growth, lifted many people out of poverty, and greatly improved people's lives there. What has been done in my hometown in Guizhou could be of some value to New Zealand when talking about infrastructure. The first story of my hometown is about bridges. Guizhou is a mountainous region with about 93% of its land surface covered by mountains and hills. So difficulties in transportation has long been the bottleneck restricting its development, leaving the people in struggle. There's a Chinese saying, 要致富先修路. The English translation is building the road is the first step to become rich. So Guizhou decided to build its way to prosperity. In Guizhou, to build highways and railroads, you need to build a lot of bridges. Now Guizhou has roughly 30,000 bridges, including those under construction. Nearly half of the 100 tallest, highest bridges in the world are in Guizhou. It's also home to 5 of the global 10 super bridges on land. Due to the large number of bridges, there are different types and complex technology used in the construction of those bridges. Guizhou now is known as the Bridge Museum of the world. Maybe we can see a short video.
All right, so you can see how the province has chosen to deal with its geographical nature, which is actually not that dissimilar to New Zealand when you look at their terrain. So Frank, what can we learn from that approach as New Zealand starts to lean into some of our infrastructure challenges?
Thanks, Brad. Hello, everyone. My name is Frank Zhu. As the Prime Minister mentioned this morning, China actually is the driver of lots of new technology globally, especially in the infrastructure. We're all familiar with, Brad just mentioned, tunnel boring machine, which make tunnel building much easier. And the bridge we just see, and they actually have one bridge building machine they call Iron Monster, and that's the nickname of this machine. And they can laying the horizontal part of the bridge fairly easy, and they prefabricate, and with that machine, all these high, big span bridges become possible. And become very, very effective and faster to build. And another machine we often see in China with a high-speed train, they call track laying machine. So they can lay the railway tracks 700 meters per day. It's almost a K per day. So that's the innovation and technology I think we should learn from China. And for knowing this and also knowing the technology, and I would think if it's too hard, like to get China construction or Chinese construction company to involve at this stage, but at least we need to consider this technology in our design phase. For instance, if we have these kinds of capability to build the bridges and tunnels, then we don't need to our roads don't need to winding down a valley and then winding down a mountain. And look, imagine the surface the road taken and the impact on the environment. And then that's maybe not even talking about 10 times, maybe 100 times more surface being taken by road, and that's destroyed to the native environment. And with those bridges, I'm sitting in a small area of Collins, and that's even less disrupted to the environment. So if we're looking at from design, innovation, and technology point of view, we should have a lot to learn from Chinese infrastructure projects, and perhaps the first thing we should do is engage the Chinese expertise in design all these, because these technology will completely change the design of our infrastructure, which will be much more effective, and the time frame will be much more promising, unlike the current. I think Infrastructure New Zealand's current conference highlight the issue of its uncertainty. All our major infrastructure projects have the uncertainty part, which make the financial funding and delivery of the project, and also the public confidence on this delivery of this infrastructure project become a really, really big issue for us.
Thanks, Frank, and I can see a few people from around the infrastructure scene in New Zealand envying those figures, 700 metres per day. Okay, that would be something we would really aspire to. The second case study we're going to talk about today is very relevant to what we've experienced over the last few months, probably as recently as this morning, and that's rain. So one of the similarities between Xingyao province and New Zealand is it rains a lot, naturally, because it's pretty mountainous, as you will have seen from that first video. So I'll get Xingyao to now introduce you to our second video, which is entitled Sponge City.
Okay, as you can see in the video, because of its mountainous landscape, in Guizhou, cities are built in small basins between mountains, which makes them prone to flooding. And the global warming also makes the problem worse. So fighting floods has been among the top issues which city authorities in my hometown need to deal with. In 2014, a new urban construction model called Sponge City was adopted by Chinese government as a policy. 30 cities in total have been chosen to pilot the Sponge City initiative. Guiyang City, the capital of Guizhou province, is one of them. Basically, the Sponge City model is a set of nature-based solutions that can capture rainwater, store it, clean it, and reuse it. It can reduce flooding as well as manage water resources in urban areas. Speaking of that, most of us here can vividly remember the recent floods we have experienced here in Auckland. I understand New Zealand has its own approach to combating floods and building more resilient infrastructure to mitigate the impacts of the climate change. So let's see the next video.
就是可以渗水的，它的这个材料呢是透水沥青，我们可以通过一个实验来展示一下它的这个渗水的效果。我们这个效果就可以达到那个小雨不湿鞋，中雨不积水，大雨不内涝。因为在下雨的时候，我们依然可以在这个路面上散步。
So Frank, you're involved with Auckland Council on their future development plans, which have obviously come into sharp relief as a result of recent events. Tell us how this approach could be used here.
Okay. So Auckland Council have a future development plan recently announced. They only give the public about 1 month consultation, and actually a lot of rising arms in the development industry, and then now they extend another month. But the cause of this new policy is because the flooding happened early this year. According to the council, this flood is once in 250 years event. So it's significant. But with the global warming and climate change, these extreme events become more and more often. And only a couple of weeks later, we have Cyclone Gabriel, which generate another flooding. So there's more and more these kinds of situation, extreme weather in our environment these days. So it is worthwhile to learn from this new concept of sponge city. As the Prime Minister and Dr. Wang Ambassador talking about this morning, if there's one word to describing the changing today's thing, changing China, I personally will pick up the one word is the it's the sustainability or climate change or carbon neutral. There's a lot of new development, new technology and innovations happening in China we can learn from and we can adapt. And I think when we talk about infrastructure, like you rightly point out at the beginning, we need to move on from the brick and mortar, the traditional infrastructure to the next generation infrastructure, which is going to help our society going through this extreme weather, climate change. So there's a lot of innovation and technology we can learn from China these days, including this sponge city.
Thanks, Frank. The next area we're going to talk about is around big data, and really big data is a way of enabling a smarter city. This is not a new concept, but what we're seeing is China taking it to a new level. Xingyao, tell us about this example.
Okay. In China, the eastern provinces have the most dynamic and vibrant economies. They are in great demand of computing power to boost business activities. However, the shortages of energy resources and land make it a difficult choice to build data centers in those regions. In contrast, China's western regions, such as Guizhou, are rich in energy, especially in renewable energy, and have a relatively cool climate, which make them ideal for running data centers. China has adopted a national policy called 东数西算 to solve the problem, which is let the western regions do data computing for the eastern areas. Under that policy, Guizhou has been chosen as the country's first big data pilot zone. It now boasts 37 data centers in operation, all under construction, working for tech giants such as Apple, Huawei, Alibaba, and Tencent. The province has promoted the big data industry as its economical engine. Now its digital economy is taking the lead nationwide. In the minds of many Chinese people, Guizhou is still regarded as a backward place. So people can hardly imagine Guizhou will have a fast-growing digital economy, but now it is happening because of the right infrastructure investment.
Thank you. Let's have a look at the final video. So if we think about the distance from Guizhou to the eastern provinces in China, we're talking about the same sort of distance from New Zealand to Australia. If we're talking about the climate of Guizhou, we're talking about the same sort of climate as the South Island of New Zealand to Australia. And the potential obviously for that data to travel in other directions. Today we have some proposals for people to develop data centres in the South Island of New Zealand, though ironically the largest concentration of data centres is here in Auckland, close to customers, but the furthest distance from renewable energy. So Frank, what can we learn, do you think, from that big data story in terms of for New Zealand's infrastructure?
Yeah, we all know the big data center is a big consumer of the energy, of the power. So really the power is the fundamental capability or demand for these big data centers. That's why I also agree with you, Brad, for New Zealand infrastructure or next generation infrastructure of New Zealand, we're not only looking at the deficits of the infrastructure, we also look at opportunities. And this area is actually a really, really big opportunity for New Zealand. You might have heard of the New Zealand renewable energy, 84% of our total electricity is renewable from renewable sources, and Australia only less than 40%. And New Zealand will be one of the top 3 countries now, the percentage of renewable electricity. And New Zealand will be one of the first country in the world to be able to achieve 100% renewable energy, with all the fundings and the government policies and also the technology evolve in the next few years. And very importantly, a lot of, I recently met with a solar energy company funder, and he mentioned New Zealand actually is very popular on the list of the big venture fund or normal fund companies in the world. They from US or from China, and they love to invest in New Zealand's renewable energy projects. So actually money is not a problem these days for infrastructure. So surprised me. A lot of people think the funding is the most important thing these days, but actually money is not an issue these days. The reason being is they see New Zealand as a role model in the world to achieve 100% renewable electricity, and all the process and lessons we learn from this process will be applicable to other countries like China, US, Australia. So they're very keen to invest that, very keen to involve that, and they don't mind offer you very, very low interest. So this is a good opportunity for New Zealand. And also another thing is all about your hometown. I come from Fujian province. So the largest battery maker called CATL. I don't know whether audience know about it. It's the biggest battery maker in the world. This year responsible for 33.9% of all the battery in whatever cars, Tesla and BYD, it's made by them. And a couple of years ago was 50% of the world batteries made by them. So battery storage has been evolved, very capable of helping us to achieve this 100%.
And I think that's really interesting, Frank, at a time when New Zealand's talking about battery storage and projects like Lake Onslow, which could, I think, has a price tag of 17 billion, which if it's like most of these projects, we can double it. China's achieving exactly the same goal, but using distributed industrial scale battery storage, much as South Australia is doing actually. And that was one of the really big outtakes from the PM's delegation. I think when we were talking about decarbonisation, we can see that China, through its development of battery technology, has really step changed that model. And yet we're still back talking about pumped hydro, which I think was first a thing in New Zealand in the 1960s. So there's a lot to be learned from what China is doing in infrastructure. Hopefully today, through the case studies we've given you, it's whetted your appetite and sparked a few ideas in the audience around areas that we can work with China. And we're almost out of time, but I'll just see, are there any questions before we move on to the next session? All right, well, please join me in thanking our panelists, Frank Xu and Xingyao.